Well, good afternoon, everybody. This is Amber Smith with Women in Ranching. We're here on location at Art of the Cowgirl in Bozeman, Montana. And I have the absolute honor of sitting down with Barbara Van Cleve, one of the greatest photographers of the American West, in my opinion, and in many others. Barbara, thank you for joining us today. And I'm going to jump in and just talk a little bit about the program and why it's so valuable to hear Barbara's story of coming into her own in the West. So Women in Ranching is here to connect and support and educate and inspire a growing network of women in agriculture. The first 2 years of the program, I so often had women show up and describe an imposter syndrome and worry about what their place was in the West, whether they grew up in ranching or had come into it. They had a hard time making a place for themselves and finding a community of support. And Barbara has been at her work for many years and is celebrated for what she does. So Barbara, I would love to hear from you how you dove into your purpose and passion, even at a time when maybe being a woman wasn't as celebrated as it is today, and maybe there were some questions about your ability and whether there was really a place for your work. So tell us a little bit more about yourself.
First of all, thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate that, and I appreciate having the opportunity to address this question, which is important. I was born and raised on the ranch, and I always wanted to share with people how wonderful ranching was. I felt it was great for a kid like me to be raised there. I had a brother and then two younger sisters. And I just thought it was wonderful. We spent so much time on horseback, working cattle. Thank God we were not into ATVs and motorcycles and all of that kind of stuff. And my nephews, saw them one day out moving horses with ATV. And when they finished, I said, "Your dad and my granddad are turning over in their graves, you doing that." And one of my nephews said, "Well, it's saving time." And I said, "What are you doing with that extra time?" Silence. So, I am from the horse age, and I loved it. There's nothing like a good animal like that. And my dad is the one who really influenced me in the sense he always said to me, "You can be anything you want to be. You just have to work for it." And so I have loved work all my life, and I have worked all my life. And it's just very wonderful to me. I remember when I said to my parents, "I want a camera. I can't draw, I can't paint, but if I have a camera, maybe I can do things like, W. Eugene Fields did in Life magazine, the documentaries on the midwife in Kentucky, and the documentary on the damages from the mercury poisoning for the people around Minamata, I think it was, Japan." Excuse me. And I thought, maybe this is my medium to communicate to people about ranching. And my mother in particular said, "No, I don't think you can make a career as a photographer." And my dad joined with her, and they said, "You have to have another career. You have to do something else." Well, I thought about that. And then I thought, I've got to have something so I can spend 3 or 4 months every summer at the ranch. So I became a teacher.
Mm.
And that was the key, as well as the fact I loved teaching. I loved sharing the knowledge, what knowledge I had.
Mm.
And my family, both mother and dad went to Harvard, mother went to, but didn't graduate because
Okay.
they got married. Mother went to University of Minnesota. So we were constantly exposed to the idea that we had to go on ahead and get a liberal arts education. All four of us, my brother, my 2 sisters, and myself, we all got college degrees, and 2 of us got graduate degrees, masters, not PhDs. And it was just very important, and it gave me the summers off at the ranch where I could recharge my batteries, so to speak,
Yep.
and get on with life. And that has been a passion for me all my life, photography and ranch life. And I wanted people to see how great it was. And because my dad was not one to believe women should stand behind their men kind of thing, you know, it was always, okay, I was pretty independent. I remember somebody asked me why I wasn't married, and I said, I didn't want to make some poor guy's life miserable, because my passions would not be the man. It would be photography and ranch life. And I knew it. And I knew that's what I wanted to do all my life. And that's what I have tried to do. I'm self-taught as a photographer. Takes a lot of time, but it's very satisfying because you never forget the mistakes, the failures you make learning.
So in your work and in your involvement with the American West and with women and replacing this mistaken narrative that the West was womanless, what gives you hope today?
What gives me hope today? That's a big question. That's a good question. Because ranching is changing. It's becoming less and less of a life on horseback and more a life on machines. Excuse me. You don't have cattle buyers coming to the ranch. They look at videos and operate from that. It's so much more a non-involved kind of life than it used to be. Oh, we're still calving, but people are calving later than we used to, which seems to me to be reasonable. I mean, those poor little calves popping out in Montana January weather, woo, it was hard on them. And I remember the house and the bathtub being filled with calves, trying to thaw them out a little bit, because the heifers would try and sneak away and have a calf in a hidden area, or they very often have it on a snowbank that led down into a little stream or a little bit of water. The poor calf would, you wanted to keep it from freezing to death, so you had to bring it in and have it in the back room on the floor on rugs, and you'd have to have it in tepid water in the bathtub to thaw them out. So it was a very hands-on kind of life. Today, calving is done much later, which it seems to me to be more reasonable too.
And, this focus on productivity and efficiency and maximization and, what are we actually losing when we think we're gaining these things?
Oh, that's so right. What are we losing when we think we are gaining? I think a lot of people feel with the whole notion of efficiency being achieved through use of of gas burning things. Not automobiles, but vehicles.
Yeah.
I think what you lose, if you say you gain time, but what are you doing with the time? What is
Right.
being used with the time? And I really think that you've lost more contact, more tangible, intimate contact with the process of ranching, of calving, of taking care of your cattle, your calves, you know.
So I think you've already answered this, but what I'm hearing is this idea of stewardship and how we're caretaking and stewarding the land and the animals and these communities. How would you define stewardship in the highest sense?
Well, we don't really own this land. We temporarily claim ownership on it as life goes on. And I think what we have to learn, and most people do, there are only a few people who are what I call bad ranchers that will overgraze their land or starve their cattle because they want more cattle than the land can support. And I really think that most ranchers are very much into the preservation of the land because it benefits their cattle, their livelihood. And they want to pass that on to their children. There's always that, to pass it on to your children. You don't want to give your children a half-baked chunk of land.
No.
You want it to be beautiful, pristine, better than it was when you got it. And I think that's very true today. It's just that the times are changing. We're having people eating more plant-based food. I could never join that group. I like my meat, thank you.
So,
and I think a lot of us are that way out west. It's true that, yes, we raise cattle to be butchered, and some city people can't understand that. They think it's horrible. You raise them and then you're going to slaughter them. Well, let's think back about the survival of the human species when we're talking about this business of slaughtering animals. I do happen to believe that we need to have more balanced meals, and I think people need to think more in terms of a balance between plant-based items as well as the carnivorous, the beef, the lamb, the bison.
And the idea, I hear of eating less meat, and I always respond, eating less generally.
That's it.
Like...
Take a look at the human race. I mean, the number of people who are obese, it's really shocking. And that's because they're eating too much, and they're eating too much of the wrong thing. Fast foods, and I'm not just talking McDonald's and Arby's and that kind of, well, Arby's, no, they have the meat. So McDonald's and some others. But the real thing is that they're eating all these potato chips, all these deep fat fried things, and with a lot of salt so that they will continue to eat them. And that's what people have to lay off. If you're going to eat chips, why not have a good baked potato?
Right. So there's a cowboy poet, his name is Jesse Ballantyne, and in one of his songs he sings, "I rode towards my destiny with wonder and with hope. Some days were a challenge and some days just a chore, but I tasted the adventure that left me wanting more. And my vision for agriculture and for the women in these rural communities is that they have equal opportunity to ride towards their future with hope and with the sense of destiny, and that they have equal participation in decision making and moving our communities forward into the future. So for all of those women listening today, what would you like to leave them with?
Well, I think women on ranches have for years been doing all of those things. They've been handling the books, they've been handling raising the kids, getting them off to school, keeping the house clean, entertaining guests, all of that kind of thing for years.
Yep.
But it's when women get off the ranch to try and be employed and are paid a third less than a man. That is not right. And I hope it changes because, well, I have to tell you a story. I saw this, somebody sent it to me, and it's a picture. You see a woman sitting at a desk. She's interviewing another woman, and she says, we need a person who can do the work of two men. And the woman who's being interviewed says, oh, you mean a part-time job? I really have to chuckle about that. Well, that's not the case on ranches. The women are, well, they are doing a tremendous amount of work, and the husbands appreciate it. But when they're photographed or interviewed, usually those women kind of step back and let their husbands take the center position and be the one that is called upon to speak. And I think that is a matter of courtesy. But personally, as somebody who was raised to be independent as can be, I believe more women should be independent. You can be very nice and independent. And I think that's what it should be. I was raised in a community where a lot of the women were very independent, and their husbands were grateful.
You know, and I see you walking in the world with this huge sense of graciousness towards others and with dignity and respect, alongside of strong independence and alongside of a strong business and pursuing your passion, all the while with a huge sense of grace and dignity. So thank you for showcasing that, and it's just absolutely an honor to get to hear from you today, Barbara. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed it. I hope my comments will be helpful.
Thank you.
Oh, just missed it.
Perfect time. Thank you so much.